So yeah, I'm Vaughn. I'm an associate professor of history at the University of Central Arkansas, and I think in some ways I'm especially fit to give this talk because although as historians we're always rattling on about how the past is always changing and we need to, really embrace these changing interpretations of the past, we ourselves as historians are really bad at change. We get stuck in our little ways of doing things, and we don't want to adapt all the time. I'm sure some of you know some colleagues like this. I'm sure some of you yourselves have struggled with this. I know I did before I became, before I worked with Macmillan. Now, today what I want to talk about is artificial intelligence. I want to give kind of a historical perspective, and I want to look forward as well. So we're kind of going to be looking back in the moment and forward. And of course, as we know, as we've all seen with AI, it seems to be changing at a breakneck speed. And I'm sure some of you feel a little anxious, like I do sometimes, like, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to keep up with this? What's going on? So that's what I have today. AI, artificial intelligence and adaptive instruction. And if I really had a thesis for today, that we need to be adapting to this ever adapting entity that is AI. Remember, AI is just a parrot, at least for right now. It's a mimic of us. It's trolling everything on the internet, and it's mimicking things back at us the way it thinks a human might sound. And what do we do with that? Let's get some perspective here. Before any of this AI stuff as we really know it came about, one of the biggest things I would ask my students a lot of times is kind of an icebreaker. When we're thinking about science and technology and progress, whatever that means, I'd pose the question to my class, what do you think in the long term is going to be a more foundational and fundamental demonstration of human ingenuity and technology and science and progress? The pyramids or the modern smartphones? What I'm getting at here is this idea of progress it's relative, okay? And it's always changing. We all think we're progressive. We're all modern. But we're at this really interesting kind of crux here because we really are, I believe, entering this what some people call this new industrial revolution. Now, I'm 37. For most of my life, AI has been this kind of fantasy thing. Whether we have the Spielberg via Kubrick film, AI, or good old HAL here, which you also see on Teslas sometimes when you do your security mode. It's been this kind of detached entity that is the things of science fiction books and movies or comic books, punchlines. But that's starting to change, and we're seeing it kind of immediately. But it's not new necessarily. I'm no huge Elon Musk guy by any means, but I really like this quote from him that he said we're all cyborgs, and that we all interact with our little machines now all the time. Smartwatches, phones. Basically, any question you have, you can answer instantly. If you want to talk to someone 5,000 miles away, just use Zoom or call them. Anyone in here have an Alexa app at home? We have Siri on our phones that's constantly listening to us. Maybe some of you had that creepy moment before where you were talking with someone about something that you get online and all of a sudden you have an advertisement for that. When we write our emails and you text, things fill in for us. Now, we just live with this day to day. We've already been living with AI on a day-to-day basis. We've been seeing, I would kind of argue, these like rays of light. Now, sometimes the rays of light are a little too harsh. It's not always a good thing, like with Cambridge Analytica in 2016, when all of our information got sold off via Facebook to this group in Cambridge, UK, and they use it for some nefarious purposes. We have things like Brexit onward. Now, going forward, what's happened recently is that those rays, the sun's peaked over the horizon. And we're starting to see it with ChatGPT. I don't know if any of you guys else had this reaction, but this was kind of mine as well. Like, oh, I've had a lot of colleagues around the office like, oh my gosh, what is this? This is going to ruin higher education. All of our students are just going to enter everything into ChatGPT. And I've always been like, okay, guys, like, let's pump the brakes here a little bit, and I'll get to that as well. But I mean, there's some incredible things here. In the first 100 days, it comes out November 30th. In the first 100 days of ChatGPT being released, it had 100 million new users. That's the fastest growing consumer application in history. Pretty mind-blowing. That's my little emoji here. Insinuates. But that says something. That says something about us. It says something about something we already wanted. Now, a lot of people, of course, probably got ChatGPT just to mess around with it, just kind of toy with it, like, what is this? But there's something deeper here. Now, I would argue that so far, I think what a lot of us have been tempted to do is push back. When we feel kind of intimidated by something or unsure of something, it's in our very nature to push back, kind of fight or flight mode. But there's also we need to push forward. Because whether we like it or not, that sun has come over the horizon. And we're going to have to try to figure out what to do with it and how to interact with it. That ship has sailed. And I've been saying this for a while, too. My stepmother-in-law hated the idea of having an Alexa device in her home. And I said, well, you have an iPhone, and it has Siri on it. So, it's not, this ship has sailed. We're working in these systems all the time. So how can we make that work for us? I mean, we have this from Chronicle of Higher Ed. A student wrote an op-ed piece. I'm a student. You have no idea how much we're using ChatGPT. No software professor could ever pick up on it. They're always going to be 5 steps ahead of us, students are. They're playing with this. They know what they're doing. It's a fool's errand for us to try to really enter their world and try to beat them at this. That's not going to happen. Now, I would argue that programs like Achieve, like what Macmillan is doing, can help us with this. AI doesn't have to be all bad. In fact, I think it can be a net positive. Now, one way, I think in the moment, we can start thinking about how to use AI as a positive learning tool as we enter this AI era, is something that's one word for sandwiching. Whereas I have up here, you use AI like a guide or a research assistant or an editor, like a conversant. It's just out there trolling for information. It can take complex ideas and break it down into simple ways for you. You can bounce ideas off of it. It can be a brainstorming device. So I have here, provides ideas and feedback on your work instantaneously almost, and with a broad scope of information. Readings, assignments, questions, and Achieve could be AI integrated where you could converse with it. And you can help students formulate your own questions, brainstorms answer, checks their answers against AI databases, which might lead to other questions or deeper analysis. Now, I've had this joke. I thought about this early on. Anyone remember this little dude back here? Yeah. He's like the OG AI. He's like ChatGPT 1.0, a little Clippy here. If AI ever gets a face and attacks us like some people think it is, I think it's going to be in the form of Clippy. He's been telling us all along. So in its most positive way, you could argue that AI can help us kind of cut out of these more mundane tasks and help us be more creative, even more human, you might argue. Now, there's always this line we're going to have to be skirting. Okay, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a machine? I'm not going to be diving in that today. I think we're going to have plenty of time to think about that. And this is because this is changing all the time. But what I am positive of is that we have to be forward thinking. Because the student of the future is going to be coming into our classrooms, not just well-versed in AI, but conversant with AI and expecting it. That's just a fact. And this is nothing necessarily new either. There's a lot of fear-mongering going on around this. Well, born in 1986. For me, I'm sure initially books, I know at some point, books are going to rot kids' minds, especially comic books or frivolous books. I think we've pretty well integrated books into higher ed. Now, that's pretty low-lying fruit. That's kind of whatever. I remember when the cable TV came out. I remember when we got cable TV. That was going to ruin everything. We've pretty well integrated TV into our classrooms, into higher ed. The computer and the internet, Wikipedia, oh no. I think we've pretty well figured that out. We wouldn't have Achieve, of course, without the computer. Video games, that's going to take kids away from everything. Gamification is critical now to higher ed. It's getting there. Now, of course, you have the ubiquitous kid at the table with a smartphone or an iPad. We already see how kids now, or young people in our classrooms, are using these devices to learn. We're integrating it. It's a process. Now, here's the thing. In 10 to 15 years, they're going to come in, and they will have been using these devices that are AI, that are wholly interlocked with AI. Anyone see what Apple released a few days ago now? Their new vision thing with the eyes. I already had this up. I would have put that on. So, and Apple at that event made a point that they addressed AI. The most powerful, wealthy companies in the world are heavily investing in this. And so you better believe that our students are going to be heavily invested in this themselves, and they're going to be using it in all sorts of ways that we probably can't even think about now. But I don't think it's a good idea to try to resist it. Now, I don't have any magic bullet on how we're going to do this, but I really want to open up the conversation. This is one of my favorite memes. We don't want to be the old man who yells at the cloud or old person who yells at the cloud pointlessly, because that's already happened. So some of the key points I want to make here is that, one, higher education is changing. Instructional strategies, but this is my big point. They always have been. It's easy for us to be in our own moment. Whatever's happened now is the craziest thing that's ever happened, or it's the biggest thing that's ever happened. But when you look into a longer historical continuum and context, something like this has happened before. Now, have we had machines thinking this way before? No, but we've had industrial revolutions. We replaced horses with automobiles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to be ready to push forward with these changes that are going on, with or without us. So the question is, how are we going to pivot? And I think, broadly speaking, we have to have continuous adaptation, but also communication with the students. Somewhat, I don't know, I mean, we know they're going to be using it, so we need to have conversation with them about that. How are you using this? How might this affect you positively and negatively? Be open with us. We're not going to stop them from using it, but what we can try to do is help guide them in how best practices for use are and how they might use AI to improve themselves and not, degrade themselves or put themselves behind. So with that, I know that Macmillan is doing some great things with Achieve on this, and we're going to be seeing this a lot more in the classroom going forward. And I'm actually pretty excited for it. I'm not dreading it. I'm going to be excited to see how I can change with my students going forward. And I'd love to, open that up and chat with you guys about it.